In this video, we're going to be looking at solving rational equations. When solving rational equations, you have to keep in mind where your function is undefined. And our function is going to be undefined when the denominator would equal 0. So we're going to set each of our denominators equal to 0 and solve. And in this case, it's just pretty straightforward, x equals 0. So 0 is not in my domain. The next thing that I'm going to do is to find my least common denominator. And in this problem, I only have one denominator, which is x, so that's my least common denominator. So I'm going to multiply both sides of my equation by x. Now, on the right-hand side, when I multiply by x, I distribute. So it ends up that every term gets multiplied by x. When you multiply through by your common denominator, your fractions go away. So now I have a quadratic equation. I'm going to get everything to one side of the equal sign to set this equal to 0. So from here, I can either factor or use the quadratic formula. And this is a problem that can easily be factored. What multiplies to give me negative 15 and adds to give me negative 2. And that would be negative 5 and positive 3. Now be careful, because a lot of times students will say that in their head, what multiplies to give me negative 15 adds to give me negative 2, and say, okay, that's negative 5 and 3, and say that that is your answer to the equation. That's not the answer to the equation. It's what goes in these spaces right here within the parentheses. From here, I still need to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So I have 5 and negative 3 as my answer. Now, once I get here, I'm not done. I have to go back and be sure that these numbers are in my domain. Scrolling back up to the top, I can see that the only number that was not in my domain was 0. So these two numbers of negative 3 and positive 5 are my solutions. Okay, for the next problem, we're going to start this off the same way by finding numbers not in my domain. So set each of my denominators equal to 0, and I get x to be 0 and x to be 12. So 0 and 12 are not in my domain. The next thing that I need to do is to find my least common denominator. So looking at the first fraction over here, this is going to indicate that I need a factor of x in my denominator. My second fraction of x minus 12 is going to indicate I need x minus 12 as a factor. And then I also need 6 as a factor. So there's my least common denominator. I'm going to multiply all three terms by that least common denominator. Now, if you want to, you can put this least common denominator over 1 so you can easily see what's on top of the fraction and what's on the bottom part of your fractions and what's going to cancel out. So for the first term, my x's are going to cancel. For my second term, the x minus 12s will cancel. And then on the right-hand side of the equal sign, the 6's will cancel. Now, what I've done here is just rewritten everything that didn't cancel, and I didn't try to rearrange the order. If I was actually doing this problem, I would probably go ahead and multiply 4 times 6 and get 24, or at least put the 4 and the 6 together up front here. But if you want to do this step by step, you can. So my next step is to try to clean this up a little bit. So now I'm going to distribute. On the left-hand side of the equation, the 24x's will cancel. Now I have a quadratic equation. I need to get everything to one side of the equal sign to set it equal to 0. And because I do not like my leading coefficient negative, I'm going to move everything to the left-hand side. So from here, I can either factor or use the quadratic formula. So using the quadratic formula, I get 24 and negative 12 for my answers. And both of those numbers are in my domain. My next problem, I'm going to start off the same way as I did the previous problems by finding numbers that are not in my domain. So I get -3 and -2. Now I need to find my least common denominator. So all three terms in my original problem are going to get multiplied by that least common denominator. So for my next step, I'm going to put all of the least common denominators over 1. Now I can easily see what's in the numerators and what's in the denominators, so I can see what's going to cancel. So in my first term, I'm going to cancel out the x plus 3's, and I'm left with x plus 2 times 3 times 2. In my next term, I'm going to cancel out the x plus 2's, so I'm left with 2 times x plus 3 times 3. On the right-hand side of the equation, my 3's are going to cancel. From here, I'm going to rewrite this as 6 times x plus 2, and this will be 6 times x plus 3. And what I'm going to do on the right-hand side is I'm going to go ahead and multiply my two binomials together using FOIL first, outer, inner, last. For my next step, I'm going to work on the left-hand side of my parentheses and distribute. On the right-hand side of the equation, I'm going to combine my like terms. From here, I'm going to combine my like terms on the left-hand side of my equation, distribute on the right-hand side. So now I have a quadratic equation. I need to get everything on one side of the equation and set it equal to 0. So I'm going to start off by subtracting 12x from both sides of my equation. Now I'm going to subtract 30 from both sides of my equation. So I get 0 equals 5x squared plus 13x. So I have a quadratic equation. I can solve this by factoring or by using the quadratic formula. And I think the easiest way to do this problem is to solve by factoring out my greatest common factor. Now I'm going to set each of my factors equal to 0 and solve. And both of those numbers are in my domain, so they're both solutions to my equation. In this problem, again, we're going to start off by finding numbers not in my domain. So I'm going to set each of my denominators equal to 0 and solve. So for my first denominator, I get x to equal 10. Now I'm going to set each of these factors equal to 0 and solve. So 10 is the only number not in my domain. Now I'm going to find my least common denominator. So looking at my first fraction, this tells me I need x minus 10 as one of my factors. Looking at the second fraction, this tells me I need x minus 10 squared. Well, I already have one of the x minus 10s. I just need one more. So there's my least common denominator. Now I'm going to multiply all three terms by my least common denominator. Now for the left-hand side, my equal sign, there's not a fraction there for me to cancel. I'm going to go ahead and FOIL these first two terms. On the right-hand side of my equal sign, x minus 10 is going to cancel for this first part. And for my last term, the x minus 10's cancel. Now I'm going to distribute the 2 on the left-hand side of the equal sign, and on the right-hand side of the equal sign, I'm going to distribute the -6. I'm going to combine my like terms on the right-hand side. Since I have a quadratic equation, I'm going to get everything to one side of the equal sign to set this equal to 0. Now that I have my quadratic equation set equal to 0, I would normally tell you to either factor or use the quadratic formula. But because I see that each of these three terms are even, they're all divisible by 2, so I'm going to divide my entire equation by 2. From here, I'm going to factor, set each of my factors equal to 0, and solve. And both of these numbers are in my domain.